folks, and welcome to Kelly's Chronicles, my channel where I sit down with individuals who have lived extraordinary lives hidden behind normal, quiet existences, because here we believe that those lives are the most important and they need to be heard, acknowledged, and celebrated as to not be forgotten by the passage of time. Hope everyone had a wonderful week. My week was really good over here. Been gloomy, but kind of sunny at the same time. Been doing some gardening, just enjoying family time. And we're just about ready to sign the lease on our restaurant and tavern that we've got over here in Gunnersville, Alabama. We're very excited about that, getting geared up for that. The whole town's really excited. We're going to be working on that for the next month or so, but we'll still find time to do the podcast, of course. And that's pretty much how my week's been going. How's your week been, Dad? How have you been doing? Heard you got some cows.
Oh, yeah, I've been kind of lazy. It's been I've done some work on the back deck, and
Okay.
I sat down. This is a kind of a revelation. I sat down and made a work list.
Oh,
I detailed out all the little things that it's going to take to get the exterior, the back part of the house ready for summer or whatever, but to get it completed, it's been on again, off again. There's a lot of little things that haven't done
yeah.
that I need to do, get down and detailed out what I need, and so now it's almost down to like half-hour segments. This half hour I do that, and then next half hour I do that. So
That's
it's
really good. That's good
much
for someone with
that
ADHD.
I used to. Yeah, I used to do that. I used to do work lists. I mean, I had extensive work lists, like whole sheets of paper, and I
Yeah.
stopped doing that. I must be getting old or something. I don't know.
No,
Yeah.
I think you've been
But
enjoying
you know what?
retirement.
Right. When I stop and think about it, in January I'll be 80.
I don't even. We're
Wow.
gonna have to throw you a
I
big
don't
birthday
even. That's
bash.
just like, what? How did I ever get to be 80? Well, I'm 79 now, but that's just like almost inconceivable to me to be 8 decades old.
Yeah.
Anyway, I can I thought about it one time. I can remember like 10 decades. I go 40. Remember a few things from the 40s.
Yeah.
When I was like up until I was 3, to 3, and I can remember a few things. And then the 50s, I remember all kinds of stuff. The 50s and the 60s, yeah, that's when I was growing up, graduating high school. And
Yeah.
70s, military, a lot of military stuff, getting married, having kids, and all that. And then the 80s were like crazy because that's when I got a divorce, and
Got remarried.
got out. Yeah, and got remarried and started having some more babies, and then the 90s, and then the aughts, and then the teens, and now I'm in the 20s. Whoa, I'm almost back to where the 40s. So pretty soon I'll be in the 30s, and then I'll be in the 40s, and I'll be 100 years old.
100.
And I'm going to go on and on. I don't know how. I'm in good health, and I feel
You
good.
sure?
I could maybe last. I think pretty sure I can last 100 years, maybe more.
120. You said 120 since I don't even know when. You're like, I'm gonna live to be
That's right.
120
That
years old.
that would be if I'm in good health, and I mean I could. Well, I told you the story. Did I ever tell you the story about Mad Batson? About a friend of mine. His name is Anderson. He's Danish. Okay, well, his great grandfather was Mad Matson. That was his name. And he was 80 years old. He married a 39-year-old woman, and we got a revision. Last time I went to see him, he revised it. He says he was 80 years old, and I thought he had 7 children, but he had 11 children.
Whoa.
From a 39-year-old. He married a 39-year-old woman, had 11 children, and outlived her. She died in her 70s, and he lived to be 119.
Dang, that's crazy.
Mad Matson.
So
Yeah,
that's
this
what I'm
tough
saying.
old
That's what I'm
Danish
saying.
sailor. Yeah, he's an old Danish sailor. He's a tough old dude, so
Yeah, that's
no, I don't wanna be
crazy. I
outdone
love
by
it.
those I don't wanna be outdone by those Danes. I'm gonna outlive. They're gonna say, "Man, them Swedes is tougher than them Danes. They're
That's right.
crazy."
Swedes. Hey,
Oh,
I think you
yeah.
can do it. You gotta be around when the grandkids get here, and you got
Oh,
one on the
yeah.
way, you got little Freddie
That's right.
coming, so gotta be a good
Yep,
grandpa and raise him with stories and just hanging out with him. He can call you whenever he wants,
yeah.
chat with
And
you.
even if I get disabled and I go to a wheelchair, I'll chase him around my wheelchair
There you
and
go.
fly. Or I'll have one of them canes with a hook on it, and I'll reach out and grab him with a hook. There, I knew,
You're like, "Come here,
I knew an
grandson."
old guy that had that cane with a hook on it, and he grab you. You go by, he grab you, and says, "Hey, come here, give me $1," You It's
No,
hilarious.
you'll set Freddie on your lap, and you guys will wheel around your wheelchair. You're right around Grandpa's wheelchair with him. Gotta live a much longer life so that you can enjoy the grandkids. They're
Absolutely,
coming your
I
way.
like my kids. I don't just like the grandkids. I like my kids. I like to sit here like with you and have
Yeah,
intelligent conversations about various subjects,
that's right.
and and just I'm amazed at my children. You guys are incredible.
Aw,
And, sometimes I go, "It can't be my kid. They look too good and they act too good to be they're supposed to be ugly little pirates. Ugly little pirates. Meow. Avast, you swabs.
advanced. We're all,
Strike the
uh,
mainsail.
we're all just
Marines to the rigging." You know? They
ah,
said I got these beauty queens and, it is, that's not me. What
beauty
happened?
queens
What
and
happened?
beauty king. Because
Yeah.
yeah, we're all very intelligent people on our own right. We're definitely
Yeah,
not ugly, I'll tell you that.
yeah, well groomed, clean,
Well groomed, clean.
neat, very respectful, and,
Yeah. Yeah, we
you're
definitely try to
just,
be.
you unbelievable. The problem with this whole thing is you look like me, so I can't deny that I could say, "Hey, somebody in a woodpile." "No, Chuck."
That's yours.
That's definitely your kid. I
That's
mean,
your
they look
child.
like some grubby old Swedes, so they look like the children of grubby old Swedes. So
Oh, well, it was funny growing up because everyone knew the Olsen kids. They were like, "Oh, that's an Olsen kid," because we all look alike, similar features, and they just always knew. So
yeah.
undeniable. So,
So
uh,
anyway,
yes, we wanted to jump back into where we left off from last week, which you've already done your basic training, you've been to the National Guard, and now you've done the Army thing, but now you're going into the Navy boot camp. So start from there. Let you take it away.
okay. Well, what happened? I'll just kind of summarize things a little bit. I came back from. I went to Army basic training in Fort Polk, Louisiana, and then I went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma to do artillery school. I got back to Arkansas in about, I believe it was October, and I got back and I started going to drills. They have a monthly National Guard has a monthly drill, and I went to a couple of the drills, and I quickly realized that this was not going to be because it's 6 years. When you go in the military like a teenager, you go in and you sign your enlistment papers. It's 6 years. And it doesn't make any difference if you're going on active duty or reserves or National Guard. You sign up for 6 years. and
Yeah.
that's your initial obligation. When there's an obligation for going in the military, it's 6 years, and it may be like 2 years of active duty and 4 years of reserves, or 4 years of active duty and 2 years of reserves. But you're obligated for 6 years. So I joined the National Guard as a 6 year obligation, and I looked at what these people were like, all this shenanigans, like they're all drunk. They go to these drills, and everybody's got a Schlitz tall boy hidden behind the chalkboard or down behind a trash can, and they're all take a sip, put it back down, and by noon they're all soused, and
Wow.
then the families come in. That was a revelation. I was there one of my first drills in this pickup truck. I mean, an old, like about a 1940 Chevy pickup, pulls up and parks on the lawn in front of the armory, the National Guard armory, and all these little kids with no shoes and the grubby looking woman get out of this pickup and spread a blanket on the grass. Dogs coming out and running around barking, and
Yeah.
they're having a picnic on the lawn in front of. And I'm going, what? Where did these people come from? Well, you're in Springdale, Arkansas. You're in the edge of the Ozarks. And these people are coming out of the hills, and Pop's
Yeah.
down there doing his drill, and all these youngins and dogs and the mom and all these are coming down there to, I guess, make sure he's not messing around. And and it was all day long. It was these people there. They weren't just there for an hour. They were there all day long on
Wow.
the lawn
I'm
in
surprised
front
they
of the
let them do
armory
that.
with these hound dogs running around. It was, and then the guys in the armory doing their drills. They're all drinking, and they got all these inside jokes. Remember old Jason down there? And remember he shot that hog? And I'm going, what are these people talking about? And
Oh,
I said, I'm not doing this for 6 years. This is
yeah.
absolutely ridiculous. I love the Army. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, maybe if I just went regular Army, it would be better. Because I remember being in Fort Polk and Fort Sill. Those people were really organized. So I called a recruiter and I said, I want to go regular Army because there's four there's four types of soldiers. There's regular Army, there's Army Reserve, there's Army National Guard, and then there's draftees. And the draftees they all have different serial numbers. Mine was NG 2544056. And then there was that was a National Guard NG, and then if you're regular Army, you're RA. If you're reserve, you're ER, and if you're draftee, you're US. So
Hmm.
you had these four different types of serial numbers for four. All that we're all doing the same jobs, but just a little bit different obligations because US they're only 2 years, and then they have 4 years of reserve. Anyway, I decided that I wanted to go into the regular Army. So I called a recruiter and I said, I want to go RA. I want to go regular Army. I don't get out of this NG stuff. And he said, oh, okay. I'll get back with you in a couple of days to tell you what's what. And he calls me back a couple of days. He says, okay, this is what's going on, Olson. Said, if you go regular Army, you can either go to Fusen, Germany, which is in the Bavarian Alps of southern Germany. And this was in November. So it would have been snow, ice, and I'm out there in an artillery unit. So I would have been out in the field setting these cannons up and doing fire drills in this
Wow.
German winter. And I said, no, I really don't want to do that. Well, what else you got? He said, oh, you can go to Vietnam. And I said,
The
you have
options.
got to
The
be kidding me.
options.
I'm in the National Guard and I want to go regular. I want to go into the regular Army. Can't you send me to like Fort Carson, Colorado, or even Fort Polk or
Yeah.
Fort Sill? Send me there, and let me. And give me a break. No, can't do that. We
Nope.
need we need bodies in Germany to hold off the Russians, and we need bodies in Vietnam to hold off the Viet Cong. Okay, thank you.
Great.
And so me and Al Brooks, my old buddy Al Brooks, I graduated from high school with him, and we sat down one day, we were having just a few beers or whatever, and sitting down and talking over what we are going to do with our lives. And he said, "Well, he said he was in financial difficulty. He couldn't get a good job, and he hadn't been in the military. He was just a civilian,
Mhm.
graduated from high school, and he was there in Arkansas. He couldn't get a job, and so he said, "Well, I would like going to the military." So he sat down. We were playing checkers. He sat down with checkers, had the black and red checkers, and we did pros. The pros were red, and the cons were black. And
Okay.
so we stacked them up, and we had this big pile of uh, red checkers that said, "Oh yeah, we're definitely going to go in the military, but which one?" And then we said, "Marines, no. My dad was a Marine. I don't really want to do that.
Yeah.
Air Force, no. Dad was in the Air Force. Really want to do that." And Army already tried that, and he rejected me basically. And so we got down to the Navy. Said, "Well, 3 hots and a cot." As I always had 3 hots and a cot. You don't have that if you're in the Marines or the regular Army because you're out in a foxhole or, marching around in the woods or something, and you don't have 3 hots and a cot.
Right.
But the Navy, you always, because 'cause you're on board ship, see? So you're kind of isolated. You don't have a lot of the difficulties that you've got in a lot of the other services, the Army or the Marines and the Air Force. I grew up in the Air Force, so I just really didn't want to have anything to do with it at that time. So anyway,
Right.
so decided on the Navy. So we said, okay, the Navy's got a buddy program where you can go in with your friend and you can go through boot camp together. And if you get the same A school, you can go through A school together and then go out in the fleet. So I
Yeah.
said, oh, that sounds great. Let's do that, Al. So we went down to see a Navy recruiter there in Fayetteville. And he said, okay, yeah, we got to send you to Little Rock. We'll give you a bus ticket and you go down there to Little Rock and they'll process you in. And
Okay.
so we got our bus tickets and went down to Little Rock and had ran around naked or not, no, we had our underwear on, but doing our physicals
Mhm.
and taking all these tests and everything. And we got down to like, we're just about, and they found out that Al had a warrant out for his arrest.
Come
Uh,
on,
What'd
Al.
you do, Al? And he said, "Oh, I know what it was. I stole some hubcaps in Fayetteville and got caught." And so anyway, he bailed himself out, and I guess it was a failure to appear, FTA, which
Yeah.
is failure to appear, and so he had this FTA warrant out, but so they had to get that straightened out before he could go in. He said, "Oh, I don't guess we're a new buddy program because I got to go get this FTA straightened out. You're going to go on." Oh, geez. So anyway, got my orders to San Diego to Navy boot camp, and we got there, and there was a meningitis epidemic going on in the not just in the Navy, but in all of the services. They were having
Wow.
a real problem with spinal meningitis, and they had this base. They call it Camp Nimitz, and it was on one side of this river that ran down and split the Naval Training Center in half. And so you had to put 2 weeks in camp, 10 days to 2 weeks in Camp Nimitz to make sure you weren't infected with spinal meningitis. And it was pretty serious. We had a guy die
Yeah.
that was he had been, he come in the Navy about the same time I did, and he was in
Oh,
Camp Nimitz and he got sick and died. And
wow.
so they weren't messing around. It was a real thing, and they weren't just doing it to harass you. I mean, we're dying. So
Yeah.
anyway, I put my 2 weeks in there, and then we went across. We crossed. It was like a big deal. We're crossing the bridge, into main side because
Mm.
Camp Nimitz has its own galley and everything. And we basically just sat around. You did a little bit of work, but mainly you just sat around at Camp Nimitz. You crossed the bridge into main side, and then it really started. That's when the real Navy boot camp started. And
Mm.
when I joined the Navy, I was prior service. Had been in the National Guard and had just got out of boot camp and artillery school a month before I'd graduated from artillery school in Fort Sill. The Navy recruiter said, "Oh, you'll be home by Christmas. You're fine. You're prior service." We got there. I was in a prior service company. Everybody in my company, which is about 100 to 120 men, all prior service. Everybody was ex-Marines, ex-Army, ex-Air Force. So, so we were all anticipating being home by Christmas. Big lie. Those recruiters, I think they're born liars. I think that they're awful. They're terrible men. Did a little bit of military stuff. We all knew how to salute, how to march, how to carry a gun. We knew all that. So basically, what we're doing is we were learning how to do things the Navy way. So we had to
Mm.
have Navy uniform, and it was funny. The first month that we were there before Christmas, we were doing the Navy stuff, and we all anticipating going home for Christmas. And then we were informed that no, we were not in it. This was because they had Christmas companies, they call them. The Christmas companies went home for Christmas. And he said, then the chief says, "This is not a Christmas company. You people are going to be here to support
Oh.
the Christmas companies." There was people coming constantly and in the boot camp. So as they were after Christmas, they really started coming in because they had the Christmas companies were all gone. They all went home and went out to their A schools and out into the fleet. And these were the new guys coming in about just like a week after Christmas. And the new guys, the new recruits were coming in, and we had to support them. And so we worked in Galley 1, and I was in charge of had a milk machine, which was this big stainless steel cabinet with 2 5-gallon cartons of milk in them, one chocolate, one white. Had to keep that full. And then after chow was over, we ran the scullery where we cleaned thousands of stainless steel trays and this giant dishwasher that looked like a garage and had these giant racks like 8 foot high, and you fill them full of trays and roll them into this big dishwasher, and then it would sanitize the trays. They were very conscious of that because of spinal meningitis.
Yeah.
Now I had got to main side, but it was over, so they were worried. I might get over to main side, keep everything clean. So we'd get up 3 o'clock in the morning and work all day in this galley and feeding thousands of people. And that was what I did for 13 weeks. Supposed to have been normal Navy boot camps about 8 weeks, 8 to 9 weeks, according to when you get there. But
It should be
ours was
longer.
13 weeks. I got there about the 20th of November. And so I was there for Christmas. I was there for my birthday, the 24th of January. And finally in February, we got to leave and go home. And it was not fun, and a very rude awakening to what the Navy will do to you, and because you're part of this gigantic. Back then, the Navy was huge. There was 600 ships in the Navy,
Wow.
and there was about a 500,000 sailors, somewhere around 500, 600,000 sailors. And it was just a
And that
gigantic, and they had bases all over the world. It was just a gigantic machine, and you were just part of the machine. I had some good times, and I don't know if I told you the story about old Parker from Texas and the smokers.
really.
You said these, yeah, we had these smokers, which were boxing matches, and
Ah.
uh, Yeah, and I don't know why they call them smokers. I guess 'cause everybody's smoking cigarettes. Anyway, they had these smokers, and they would just take two guys. They didn't say, "Oh, the little guy and the big guy." But just a kind of a lottery thing. You didn't really choose unless you won, and then if you won, then you had to defend your title. And there's this one guy, this
Okay.
brute they had, and he was just beating up on everybody. And you had boxing gloves on, but still,
Yeah.
it was not. These weren't professional boxers, and this big guy he'd go in there and just windmill. These little guys get knocked down, and everybody was laughing at him. They finally got down. And they said, "Okay, does anybody else want to box this man?" Parker goes, "I think I will." And he was about my height and
Okay.
smallish guy. He wasn't a monster at all. He's from Texas, and old Parker
Yeah.
gets in there, puts his gloves on, and just commenced to wail on this guy.
Oh
Just
my god.
pounded him into the canvas. He didn't have he didn't, I don't think he ever got one punch landed on Parker. He'd swing at him and he'd be behind him. And he'd swing again, he'd be over here. He was quick.
Well,
And
it's a
and then,
scruffy
and
dude.
he just humiliated this guy, and everybody's going, "Way to go, Parker! Yay!" Because there was more than one company. There was about 3 or 4 companies, this smoker, and he was pounded on this guy from another company. Anyway, after that, we had a lot of respect for Parker. Yeah, he was a good guy. I think he's a good guy anyway, but I mean, he was a
Yeah.
good boxer, and everybody had a lot of respect for that. And there was a couple other things that happened, and now this was totally different than the army. We had laundry. We had
Mhm.
a laundry that did all of our clothes for us, and I don't think we had wash machines. I think we just had a laundry, and we'd send our stuff off, and it'd come back all folded neatly. And in the Navy, the chief says, "Okay, this is your automatic wash machine." It was a bucket, a bottle of whisk liquid, and a scrub
Oh.
brush. And
Oh.
and then we had these big concrete tables outside the barracks, and you would go out there and on that scrub table, and you would scrub your whites, and that's all you wore in San Diego. You just wore whites. You never wore blues or anything. We would scrub our whites on these tables, and then they would have a daily inspection where you all line up, and the chief would come down the row and he would look at you. I think he picked on certain people, but anyway, he would grab your T-shirt and pull it down. And if you look at a regular man's T-shirt, there's a ribbed collar, and
Right.
then underneath the ribbed collar is where they sewed it together. And there's like a little seam there that is like a cotton strip, and it has little fibers on it. So you pull that down and look at those little fibers. And if there's any discoloration on that collar, he'd stick it in your mouth. Chew that out. And
Oh
then
my god.
he might have you doing push-ups. He was really bad. He would go, give me 10, or give me 20. Now that was the t-shirts. Now the underwear, they
Oh
would
no.
you were given these what they call clothes stops. And what there was a piece of cotton cordage about 6 or 8 inches long with a metal tip on each end, kind of like a shoelace. And
Yeah.
that was your clothes stop. And that's what you hung your clothes up with on a clothesline. And it
Okay.
was you would tie a knot somewhere on your t-shirt. It was down on the bottom of the t-shirt. You take a little wad of cloth and you wrap the clothes stop around it and put it over the clothesline. And it had to be knotted a certain way. And you'd have all these hundreds of pairs of mainly underwear and socks and stuff hanging on the line with clothes stops on them. And the chief would go down and inspect because he didn't want to look at your underwear while it was on you. So you go down and look at your skivvies hanging on the line. And oh, if you had hash marks in your skivvies, he would pull that off the line. He'd go, "Olson, front and center." "Yes, chief." This your skivvies? Yes, Chief. There's hash marks in them. Put them hash marks in your mouth. Chew them hash
Oh,
marks out.
no.
so, so you definitely want to have clean clothing, or you may end up chewing it out. And it also at night they would make you stand guard over your clothesline. So you had some guy with a rifle marching back and forth up and down the clothesline to make sure that some other company didn't come over and mess with your clothes or birds didn't get on or something. Anyway, you had 4 hour, was it 4 hours? Might have been an hour. Anyway, you would all night long there'd be some poor sailor out there marching up and down the clotheslines, standing guard. And yeah, that was just the Navy. That was just the way they did things, and there wasn't any laundry or anything. You were the laundry for your clothing, and then if you messed up really bad, now they didn't do this too much to our company because the chief that was in charge of our company was an alcoholic, and he was fixing to retire. This was
Uh,
his last job in the
okay.
Navy, and he did not care. He had
Oh,
he
you were
would come
lucky.
he would come in at 3 o'clock in the morning and wake everybody up and, hey, you damn sailor, get out of here, stand at attention, and then go along and make you do push-ups or something.
Oh,
And it
no.
was just it was crazy, but it wasn't as bad as it could have been because there's a lot of things that other companies were doing that we never did. You messed up, you would there was a what they call a grinder. It was this gigantic paved parade ground. And if you messed up, you would get your rifle and you'd high port and you'd hold the rifle over your head and run around this grinder. However you messed up, the more you would have to run around the grinder. You might go once or twice or three times at high port. And then if you really, really messed up, then you take your sea bag and you would empty out your locker into your sea bag and high port your sea bag around the grinder. And believe me, a 30-pound sea bag held over your head is pretty heavy. So they had various ways of disciplining you without actually doing some punitive punishment.
Yeah.
It was all physical and lots of push-ups. Our chief didn't really ever have anybody. I don't remember anybody in the high port. That was other companies. So our chief, but in that regard, was a little lenient, and that was good. And I
Oh,
think because we were getting up at 3 o'clock and going to the galley. We didn't,
yeah, I was
you know,
gonna say,
he didn't. He said, "You boys are being punished enough. you you don't need me messing with you." And and then after you finish your boot camp, you graduate from boot camp. And I graduated, like I said, in February, and I got orders. We take a test. You take a test when you come in the Navy. It's called GCTARI. This is before. Now they had ASVAB, but back then it was GCTRI. It was General Classification Test and Arithmetic Test for mathematics. And I got a really high score. The maximum score was 75. I had 72s and 73s. So I was up there. I'm not bragging. I'm just saying the facts. Just the facts, ma'am.
just a
So I
fact.
was I was
Okay.
I was in the top 1% or 2% of the Navy people taking this test, and I could have had any job in the Navy. The jobs with those high GCTRIs are reserved for radarman, radioman, fire control technician, and some of the aviation rates. If
Mhm.
you don't have those high scores up in the top 10%, you're not going to go to the schools. And
Wow.
so I got ordered to radarman A school in Great Lakes, Illinois, and that was like, whoa, you must be pretty smart, Chuck. You going to radar school, and so I went up to Great Lakes, Illinois, and Great Lakes is north of Chicago, right on Lake Michigan, and it is brutal in the winter. It's
Oh,
you got
yeah.
that wind coming off that lake, and it's cold and snow. I got there in February, and I just caught a little bit of the end of winter. March was a little better, and then the rest of it was spring and summer, so it wasn't too bad. Plus, I wasn't having to do push-ups and everything. When we first got there, we were in old barracks. These were World War II barracks. They were probably about a quarter of a mile from the actual school, and we had to march up there every day there was a chow hall on that was on right there, pretty close to the school. We marched to the chow hall and have breakfast and go on to the school. And we did that for about a month and a month and a half. And this was a 6-month school, which is one of the longest schools in the Navy.
Huh.
Anyway, we did that for about 6 weeks or so, and then they opened up brand new barracks, and I was on the 3rd floor of these brand new barracks, right across the street from the chow hall and right down the street from the school. So it was like heaven. Ooh, and you had
Wow.
and the old World War II barracks were in these big bays, this open bay, all the racks in this one giant room, double bunks. We went
Okay.
to these new barracks. It was 4-man rooms, like a college dorm, and it was incredible. Yeah, we were really happy about that, and
Yeah,
that's how I
bet.
spent my last about 4 months of radar school was in these brand new barracks, and I had a really good bunch of guys in my class. There's about 20 of us.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, this is this is my A school, radar and A school. It says right down here. It says U.S. Naval School Radarman Class A 21 Alpha 66. So it's 1966, Great Lakes, Illinois. 5 August. This is my graduation day. Was 5 August 1966. I'll
That's
guarantee
awesome.
you can't
Where you
find
at?
me in this picture. Okay, I am right here, top
Oh,
row. And you see I'm wearing my hat. I thought I was pretty cocky. When you got out of boot camp, this hat was like a rag that you put on your head and you didn't care what it looked like. But then when you got into A school and got out in the fleet, you would do really miraculous things. Your hat, you'd roll the edges and everything. And then mine was rolled. I rolled the edges on it and made it more of a round hat rather than just this rag on your head. Yeah, that was my class. I don't know if you can really see me
yeah.
very well.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I love it.
And, there was a couple of really cool dudes in there. I had one guy that was a gymnast. I was talking about that before we started, and and then there was another guy who was a weightlifter, guy from, a good friend of mine named, Wyrick, and, I wrote on the back of the picture and, had a bunch of the guys'
Yeah.
names and everything. Some of the guys wrote it themselves, and some of them I wrote. Anyway, there
Like
was a
in your
guy
book.
in there named Wyrick, was a real good friend of mine. He was from Muncie, Indiana, and we went down on a weekend. I can't remember if we rented a car or just took a bus down, but he went down to Muncie, Indiana to see his family and just get to know him a little bit better.
Mhm.
Muncie, Indiana was the home of ball jars. You ever see a
Ah,
ball jar that you use for
yeah.
canning? Well, that's where they're made, is in Muncie, Indiana, and they have Ball State University there. So the
Huh.
Ball family, endowed a college, and they named it after him, and it's Ball State. Anyway, I went down there with Wyrick, and when we got out of radar school, I went out to fleet. I went out to a ship, and he went into Inshore Underwater Warfare Group 1, ISWG 1.
Whoa.
And, what it was a highly classified outfit, and they were responsible for ensuring that no swimmers or hostile boats got into a harbor. And so they had these inshore underwater groups all over Vietnam, and he was stationed in Da Nang on a
Mm.
Monkey Mountain, which is at the mouth of the harbor, and they strung a bunch of buoys across the harbor entrance, both on the surface and underwater. They were acoustic, and they could detect a swimmer or a boat coming into the harbor.
Wow.
And the Viet Cong found out that they were there, and they sent a group of Viet Cong over there to Monkey Mountain, and they wiped out inshore underwater warfare group 1 and killed my friend.
Mm.
And anyway, um, we went all over the class broke after we graduated. We broke up and we went all over. Guys went to Spain, to Rota, Spain. Guys went to
Wow.
Vietnam. Guys stayed in Great Lakes to be instructors. I got orders to the Floyd County, USS Floyd County, which was LST 762. And LST stands for Landing Ship Tank. And what it is it's about a 350-foot ship, and it has a well deck on it, which is practically the whole length of the ship, and it has doors in the front, in the front of the well deck. And so what they would do with these LSTs is they had this gigantic anchor on the back with a winch, and it was flat bottom, and they would get up and they would have a beach somewhere that had a bunch of Marines on it, or they were going to land Marines, and they had trucks, and they needed tanks, and they needed food and ammunition. They'd run this LST up on the beach, drop the anchor about a quarter of a mile off the beach, and let out the cable, and then run this thing up on the beach. And then
Mm.
when we were done, when they emptied everybody out of the well deck, and then they would crank on that cable and pull themselves off the beach and go get another load of stuff. And if
Mm.
you ever look at like the landings at Normandy or any other major amphibious assault, there's
That was
LSTs. And our LST, the one I was on, had was mainly in the Pacific, and it supplied Marines on the beach in several really hardcore landings in the Pacific. They didn't go to Normandy, but they went to the Pacific, and that was what I was on. And it was
okay.
when I got on it, it was already 20 years old. I reported to the Subic Bay in the Philippines, and a big naval base, huge naval base, the biggest one, probably one of the biggest ones in the world. And they'd bring in 2 or 3 aircraft carriers in there, thousands of sailors. They had a big air station there, QB Point Air Station. They had a big radio stations, and it was just amazing, big deal. Anyway, I flew to the Philippines, and I was put into what they call X Division, which is that's where sailors, they're waiting for their ships to come in, or they're being discharged and waiting to go home, or it's like a work detail place where they would have workers come out and do various jobs on the base. So I reported to X Division in Subic Bay, and it went the first day. They went down. We had quarters at 8 o'clock, which you do everywhere in the military. So you
Right.
had your muster at 8 o'clock. So we had our muster, and they said, "Okay, here's your jobs for the day." They went down and they said, "Okay, Jones and Smith, they're going to the post office. You're going to be sorting mail, and then the other guy, you're going to go to the galley and work in the scullery." And then I didn't get a job. I didn't have a job. So I could have been a good little sailor and went up and said, "Hey, chief, I didn't get a job." No, I didn't do that.
Well, you have a history of that now. We know that.
I didn't do that. I went out to the beach. I put on my uniform and I went out to this town that was outside the gate, Longapo City. I went out in Longapo City, and the next day, same thing, no job. I went out on the beach, and you had to be back at midnight, but you could go out and do whatever until midnight, like everybody else. And so about the second or third day, I was walking down and I looked over and here's this American Legion. And I said, whoa, my dad's an American Legion. My mom's an American Legion. I'm going to go over and check this out. So I went in there and sure enough, it was for expatriates that were, there in the Philippines and then for also active duty military. And they let me join. I went in there and I had a Cuba Libre. I love Cuba Libres and Coke and rum. And
Yeah.
I had a Cuba Libre and I joined American Legion. And I
Ah,
stayed in it for a long time after. Anyway, that's where I joined
yeah.
originally. And and that was my home base. I could go in there and after a while people knew me and yeah, I was in and out of Subic all for 3 or 4 years that I was in the Navy. I was in and out of Subic a lot, and they
Yeah.
all got to know me, and it was like my home base. Anyway, um, uh, Subic City was basically a Navy town.
Mhm.
Now, Angeles City, which was north of there, that was where they had a big Air Force base up there, and that was Air Force territory. But Subic Bay was Navy and Marine. Period. There was no Army, no Air Force, nothing there, just sailors and Marine. And these carriers would pull in there and they would have each of the carriers have about 5 or 6,000 men on board. They would have the Marines count the people leaving the base and going into Longapo. Had little clickers, click, click, click. And when they got to 13,000 men, they would close the gate.
Wow.
Nobody could go out on the beach because there was 13,000 there was 13,000 hookers
Ah, that's what
in
it was.
Longboat, and you wanted to have one for each man. So they 13,000, and that was they closed it.
Oh my gosh.
That was what they told us anyway. That's what they told us. There's
Wow.
13,000 hookers out there, and we'll give you one each, and that's it.
And that's
You
it.
can't have 2 men you gotta have 2 men with 1 woman. You gotta have and yeah, it was incredible. It was just like
Well,
just insanity out there.
yeah. Well, let's wrap it up right there for today. I know I'm
Okay.
like so intrigued by all these stories. I don't want to finish, but we have lives to live. So, well, folks, thank you so much for joining us today. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share with your friends and your family. And as always, please stay safe out there, especially on the roadways. And we will see you next week.